It was supposed to be just another quiet evening, the kind of night when the air is heavy with comfort instead of fear, when the clinking of forks against plates is the only sound echoing in the dining room. I had roasted chicken in the oven garlic butter rolls resting in a basket, a soft candle flickering between us on the table I had polished 3 times over. My hands were trembling not because of nerves about the meal, but because of the words I had been keeping inside me for weeks. Tonight, I was going to tell Ryan, my husband, that I was carrying his child. I thought maybe, just maybe, the warmth of this dinner might break through the wall that had grown between us ever since his mother moved in. But instead of joy, instead of the soft smile I had rehearsed in my mind, I got the crack of his hand across my face. My husband slapped me so hard that my chair scraped against the floor, and I almost toppled sideways, the taste of iron flooding my mouth before I even understood what had happened. And it all began because of her, because of the woman who sat smirking at the edge of the table, her voice dripping poison straight into her son's ear. Marjorie had leaned in moments earlier, whispering something I couldn't hear, and like a switch flipping inside his head, Ryan's eyes went cold, his jaw locked, and his hand rose. That single slap tore through the air louder than any scream. My skin burned, my ears rang, and as I pressed my palm to my swelling cheek, my body shook with both fear and disbelief. My gaze darted toward her, toward Marjorie, and what I saw was not concern, not shock, but satisfaction curling at the corner of her lips, as if she had won. She wanted me broken. She wanted me silent. She wanted me erased. And in that instant, I knew this was not just a family dinner. This was a war declared on my life, and it was a war I could no longer pretend not to fight. Before the slap, before the poison of his mother's words seeped into every corner of our marriage, there was once a version of Ryan that made my heart believe in forever. I met him in the most ordinary place, the university library, where I worked part-time shelving books and helping students. He walked in one rainy afternoon, his hair dripping, his shirt sticking to his shoulders, carrying a stack of engineering textbooks that nearly toppled out of his arms. When one slipped and scattered papers across the floor, I bent down to help, and our eyes met. His smile then was nervous but kind, the type that seemed embarrassed to exist, and I remember thinking he looked like someone who cared too much about everything. From that moment, he found excuses to come back to ask me about novels he clearly never intended to read, to leave coffee on the counter with my name written in clumsy marker. Our first date was in a cheap diner with sticky red booths where he ordered pancakes at midnight and confessed he had no idea how to talk to women. He didn't need to. His honesty, his awkward laughter, his boyish sincerity wrapped around me like a warm blanket. Within a year, he proposed under autumn leaves, slipping a silver ring onto my trembling finger while vowing that he would protect me from everything that could ever hurt me. We got married in a small ceremony under strings of fairy lights, surrounded by friends who toasted us as the couple who couldn't stop smiling. The early years of our marriage were simple and sweet. Saturday mornings with blueberry waffles, Sunday afternoons at flea markets, late nights watching old movies while our legs tangled under the same blanket. He would sketch me sometimes when he thought I wasn't looking, filling notebooks with little portraits of my face, as if he couldn't believe I was real. That was Ryan before Marjorie. That was the man I thought I had chosen forever. I clung to those memories because they were proof that once upon a time there had been love, laughter, and safety in his arms, not bruises, suspicion, and silence. And yet, even as I replayed those golden years, I realized with a chill that the past could not save me, that nostalgia could not shield me from what his mother was about to turn him into. It began innocently enough, or at least that was the mask she wore when she first arrived with 2 suitcases and tear-streaked cheeks, begging Ryan to let her stay until she found her footing after her second divorce. I wanted to believe she was broken, that maybe opening our home to her was an act of compassion that would bring us closer as a family, so I nodded even when my stomach twisted. The first week she played the role of the grateful guest cooking dinner, folding laundry, smiling at me with syrupy sweetness. But little by little the sugar melted away, replaced with sharpness, so subtle Ryan didn't notice. She would wrinkle her nose at the meals I prepared and say things like, "Are you sure this is what Ryan likes, dear? He always preferred more spice." She rearranged my spice rack, moved my pots, claimed she was helping, but every move screamed intrusion. When I came home from work one evening, I found her sitting on our couch with Ryan whispering about finances, her voice carrying just enough for me to catch fragments, like she doesn't understand responsibility and she spends too much time at that library. Ryan laughed nervously, then brushing it off, but something flickered in his eyes, a seed planted. From then on, her presence was everywhere, her perfume lingering in the hall, her voice echoing in the walls, her judgment cloaked in smiles. When I bought new curtains, she sighed and said the color was too gloomy, maybe not the best environment for Ryan. When I forgot to replace the milk, she tisked and muttered how men deserve wives who pay attention to detail. At first, Ryan defended me, telling her to ease up, but weeks turned into months, and the lines between her opinions and his began to blur. One night, as I brushed my teeth, I overheard her on the phone, her tone low but deliberate. "She's hiding something. She said I see the way she sneaks off, always running to the bathroom, probably stress from lying." My blood ran cold, and when Ryan came to bed that night, his eyes lingered on me differently. Suspicion where there once was trust. Slowly, he began asking questions, small at first. "Why are you so tired? Who were you texting? Why do you seem distant?" I laughed them off, but inside I trembled because I knew where those questions came from. They were not his words. They were hers, wearing his voice. The more she whispered, the colder he became, and when I tried to talk to him about the tension he dismissed me with, "She doesn't mean it. It's just how she is. You're imagining things." But I wasn't imagining the way he started snapping over nothing, the way his hand clenched into a fist on the table when dinner wasn't ready on time, the way he grabbed my arm too tightly when I said I needed space. I told myself I could endure it, that maybe if I stayed calm, if I stayed kind, he would remember the man he once was, but every day it became clearer. Marjorie wasn't just living in our home, she was infecting it. She was dismantling my marriage piece by piece, and I was running out of time to stop her. The night of the slap was supposed to be a celebration, a night where the storm would finally break and light would return to my marriage. I had spent the afternoon in the kitchen, my hands shaking not from exhaustion, but from anticipation, layering dishes with care, the way I once did when Ryan and I were still new, when food and laughter had been the glue that held us close. I roasted chicken until the skin turned golden, mashed potatoes, whipped smooth rolls rising warm and buttery in the oven. A small box sat hidden under the table, wrapped in pale paper inside a onesie I had bought on impulse weeks ago when I first learned I was pregnant. I wanted to tell him that way through a quiet dinner, a gift that symbolized a future we had dreamed of together. But as the timer ticked down, I heard her voice from the living room, hushed yet sharp, carrying enough that I could catch the venom. "She is hiding something." Marjorie whispered, her tone cutting. "She disappears for hours, always sick, always distant. She is not telling you the truth. Ryan, she is lying. She is making a fool out of you." My hands froze over the pan as the words pierced me like knives. I knew then that the night would not unfold as I had dreamed, but I clung to hope anyway, telling myself maybe he would laugh at her suspicion, maybe love would outweigh poison. When I placed the plates on the table, Marjorie's eyes followed me like a predator's, her lips curling in satisfaction. Ryan sat stiff jaw, locked eyes darting between me and her. He barely touched the food, and when I tried to smile, when I tried to ease the tension, he suddenly shoved his chair back so hard it screeched against the floor. "Is it true?" he demanded, his voice loud, sharp, so unlike the man I had once known. "Are you lying to me? Are you hiding something?" I stared, my heart pounding against my ribs, not understanding. "Ryan, please," I whispered. "I don't know what you mean." "Don't play with me!" he roared, his face flushed, veins tight in his neck, his mother's gaze gleaming at his side. And then his hand rose fast, hard, unforgiving. The slap cracked across my cheek with such force I stumbled sideways, my vision blurring, the taste of blood filling my mouth. The room spun, the plates rattled, the candle toppled. I clutched my face, tears streaming not from pain alone, but from betrayal so deep it split me in half. And Marjorie, she did not gasp, she did not rush forward, she did not care. Instead, she smirked her satisfaction, complete, as though this had been her plan all along. I opened my mouth to speak, but nausea surged, the sickness of pregnancy colliding with shock, and I doubled over, retching onto the floor. Ryan recoiled, his face twisting in disgust, but then something clattered from my purse where it had spilled open on the chair, the faint glint of a small recorder I had hidden days ago. My insurance against the whispers that I feared would one day consume me. Marjorie's eyes widened when she saw it. But before she could react, the front door creaked open and Helen, our neighbor, stepped inside, drawn by the shouting. Her eyes froze on the scene before her, me on the floor, blood and vomit staining my blouse. Ryan's hand still trembling from the blow. Marjorie's face twisted in glee. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating, broken only by Helen's sharp intake of breath. "What is happening here?" she demanded, her voice trembling with both fear and anger. Ryan stammered. Marjorie hissed, but Helen's gaze had already fallen to the recorder glittering faintly by my purse. She bent, picked it up, her eyes narrowing as realization struck. For the first time since the nightmare began, I felt the faint flicker of something stronger than fear. Witness. Proof. A lifeline. The slap had broken something inside me, but it had also drawn the first blood in a battle I was finally ready to fight. Helen's hand closed around the recorder like it was a weapon forged from truth, her eyes narrowing as she glanced at me, then at Ryan, then finally at Marjorie, who for the first time looked unsettled. I could see the calculation flicker in her eyes, the realization that the control she thought she had might be slipping. Ryan reached out quickly, his voice rising. "Give that to me, it's mine." "But—" Helen drew back, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "No," she said, her tone sharp. "This belongs to her. Not you and I heard enough to know something is terribly wrong here." Ryan froze, torn between anger and shame, but Marjorie surged forward, her voice shrill. "You don't know what you're talking about," she snapped. "She's manipulating everyone. She's always been a liar." I wanted to scream that it wasn't true, but my throat burned, my cheek throbbed, my body shook too much to form words. Helen didn't wait. She turned to me, her eyes filled with determination. "Get your things," she whispered urgently. "You're coming with me." I nodded, clutching my stomach terrified for the tiny life inside me, and stumbled toward the door while Ryan's protests filled the room. Marjorie's voice rang after us, venomous. "She'll regret this. Ryan, she'll regret it." But Helen slammed the door behind me, and the cool night air hit my lungs like freedom. At her house, I collapsed onto her couch, sobbing until there was nothing left but silence. She handed me a glass of water, her voice firm. "You can't go back there, not after tonight. You need to protect yourself and that child." I stared at her, the reality of what had just happened crashing down, and for the first time I admitted the truth aloud. He hit me. He believed her over me, and he won't stop. Helen's hand covered mine. "Then you fight," she said simply. "You fight smart, not just for yourself, but for your baby." The next morning, she drove me to the doctor, where relief washed over me as the steady rhythm of a heartbeat filled the room, proof that the life inside me had survived the chaos. Tears blurred my vision, but beneath the grief, a new resolve began to form. That night, Helen sat beside me as I listened to the recording. Every word of Marjorie's manipulation, every whisper designed to erode Ryan's trust, every cruel insinuation was captured. My stomach knotted, but my heart hardened. This was not just pain, this was evidence, and evidence meant power. Helen urged me to see a lawyer to take the recording and the bruises and file for protection. At first, I hesitated, clinging to the echo of the man Ryan once was, but then I remembered his face twisted with rage, his hand raised against me, his disgust as I retched on the floor. That was not love, that was not safety. That was a prison, and Marjorie held the key. I made the call. The attorney listened carefully, her eyes narrowing as she heard the tape, her voice sharp with certainty. "You have enough to pursue a restraining order," she said, "and if you're willing, you can take them both to court." I swallowed the words heavy on my tongue. Court. Exposing everything. It terrified me, but Helen's hand squeezed my shoulder, grounding me. For years, Marjorie had thrived in the shadows, whispering, manipulating, twisting the truth until Ryan became her puppet. But the shadows could not protect her in front of a judge, not when the truth was recorded, not when bruises mapped across my face and arms. That night, as I lay in Helen's guest room, one hand pressed to my belly, I whispered a promise to my unborn child. I will not raise you in fear. I will not let them destroy us. I will fight and I will win. And in the stillness of that vow, I felt something ignite inside me, not just survival, but defiance, the kind that does not back down once the war has begun. The courthouse smelled of dust and paper, the kind of place where lives are reshaped not with fists, but with words and evidence, and as I walked through its heavy doors clutching Helen's hand, I felt both smaller than I had ever been and stronger than I ever thought I could be. Ryan was already there, sitting stiff in a navy suit that looked borrowed, his jaw tight, his eyes refusing to meet mine. Beside him sat Marjorie, her hair perfectly coiffed, her lips painted in that same shade of crimson that had smirked at me the night of the slap. She looked like she was attending a luncheon, not standing trial for dismantling her son's marriage. When the judge called the session to order, the silence in the room was sharp. Ryan's attorney stood first, painting him as a man under stress, misled by lies, pressured by a manipulative wife. He claimed I exaggerated, that I had provoked Ryan, that the slap was a momentary lapse, not a pattern. I clenched my fists, fighting the urge to scream, but my attorney rose with calm precision, her voice steady as steel. She held up photos of my bruised cheek, my swollen arm, my medical report confirming trauma. She spoke of the pregnancy, of the danger to both me and the child. And then she pressed play on the recorder. The room filled with Marjorie's voice, low and cutting, every whisper dripping venom. She is hiding something. She is lying. She is betraying you. You need to put her in her place. The words echoed undeniable, and the courtroom shifted eyes, widening heads turning toward Marjorie. For the first time, her composure cracked, her hands twitching against her lap, her mouth opening, then closing like a fish gasping for air. Ryan's face drained of color, his shoulders collapsing as if the weight of the truth finally crushed him. My attorney didn't stop there. She called Helen to the stand, who testified with a voice clear and resolute about what she saw that night, me on the floor, blood and vomit on my blouse. Ryan's raised hand, Marjorie's chilling satisfaction. Helen held up the small recorder, her hands steady, and the judge nodded gravely, the evidence unshakable. Ryan's lawyer tried to object, tried to twist the narrative, but the judge silenced him with a raised hand. Enough, she said firmly, her voice carrying authority that cut through the lies. This is not the behavior of a husband protecting his family. This is abuse. And this is not the guidance of a mother. This is manipulation of the worst kind. My heart pounded, my palms slick, but I forced myself to meet Ryan's eyes. For a flicker of a second, I saw something there. Shame, regret, maybe even recognition of the monster he had become under her influence. But it was too late. The judge's ruling fell like a gavel on my chest and set me free all at once. A restraining order was granted, full protection for me and my unborn child. Ryan was ordered to attend mandatory anger management therapy, stripped of access until further evaluation. Marjorie was banned from any contact, her role as grandmother legally severed before it ever began. And the custody papers Ryan had once thought would be his shield were now my sword. They ensured that if he ever raised a hand again, I would have full custody without contest. The courtroom buzzed with whispers, the spectacle of a mother and son unraveled by their own cruelty. And as I walked out with Helen, heads turned, not with pity, but with something harder, sharper judgment for them, respect for me. Marjorie hissed as I passed her mask, finally gone, her voice a snake's last strike. You'll pay for this, she spat, but the bailiff's stern presence kept her rooted to the bench. I didn't flinch, didn't pause, didn't even look back. My voice was steady, my heart loud. No, Marjorie, I said you already did. You destroyed yourself the moment you turned love into a weapon. The heavy doors swung shut behind me, and the air outside felt cleaner, freer, as though justice itself had swept the poison from my lungs. For the first time in months, I breathed without fear, knowing that while the battle was not over, the tide had turned irreversibly. The court had seen the truth, the world had heard the lies unravel, and the war Marjorie thought she had won was now the very one that ended her reign of control. In the weeks that followed the court's decision, the ripple of consequences spread through every corner of Ryan's and Marjorie's lives like cracks in a fragile piece of glass, finally shattering. Ryan moved out of the house we once shared, not to some clean apartment or friendly couch, but into a dingy rental his lawyer had found for him, a place stripped of warmth, where the silence pressed against the walls heavier than the weight of his guilt. Word spread quickly among his colleagues at the firm whispers of domestic violence, of restraining orders, of a courtroom humiliation he could never fully hide. Clients began pulling back, projects were reassigned, and though he tried to walk tall in public, his shoulders hunched with the shame of a man no longer respected. Marjorie fared no better. Her social circle, once filled with church friends and charity committees, turned cold the moment the recording circulated among them because Helen, ever protective and fiercely determined, had shared it with the right people. There was no sympathy for a woman caught encouraging her son to strike his pregnant wife, only disgust, only condemnation. She stopped showing her face at gatherings, stopped volunteering, stopped pretending to be the dignified matriarch she once fancied herself. Instead, she lingered in the shadows of her small rental across town, bitterness curdling her features each time she caught sight of me walking through the neighborhood with Helen by my side. Ryan tried once to call me to beg for another chance to promise he was different, but the restraining order silenced him, and I saved his voicemail only to play for my lawyer. Marjorie, however, refused to surrender so easily. She lurked near places she thought I might be parked her car across from the library where I still worked, sent anonymous notes that reeked of her perfume. Each attempt became another line in the police reports, another piece of evidence that reinforced the boundaries she could not cross without consequence. My attorney pressed forward, filing motion after motion, and each time the law answered not with pity but with iron. Restraining order extended, additional charges considered, supervised visits denied. For every step they tried to take toward me, I built a wall higher, stronger, reinforced not just with paper and ink, but with resolve I never knew I possessed. And as their world crumbled, mine, though fragile, began to take shape again. The house once poisoned by Marjorie's presence was stripped of her scent. Her photographs removed, her figurines, boxed up and thrown away. Helen helped me repaint the walls, soft yellows and greens that whispered safety instead of control, and each stroke of the brush felt like reclaiming space I had thought lost forever. Still, the fallout was not without scars. At night, I sometimes woke trembling, my cheek aching with phantom pain, the sound of that slap replaying in my mind. But then I would hear the steady rhythm of my baby's heartbeat from the recording the doctor had given me, and I remembered why I had chosen to fight. The consequences Ryan and Marjorie faced were not just punishments handed down by a court. They were the unraveling of the empire they had tried to build on fear. Ryan lost his family, his reputation, the respect of his peers. Marjorie lost her influence, her imagined legacy, and the grandchild she believed she had a right to claim. And I gained what they could never have again: freedom. For the first time in years, I could breathe without the weight of suspicion, without the sting of cruelty disguised as care. The fallout was brutal, but it was also justice, and it was mine. By the time the leaves began to turn and the air grew crisp with the promise of autumn, the house I once feared to walk through alone had transformed into something new, something softer, something mine. The nursery glowed with painted woodland animals, the rocking chair tucked near the window, now a throne of quiet strength rather than a cage of anxiety. Helen had strung tiny lights across the ceiling, their gentle glow filling the nights when sleep refused to come. And with every flicker, I reminded myself that I had survived, that I had broken free. The day my daughter was born, the sky outside the hospital window was pale blue, unremarkable, but inside the delivery room, everything was extraordinary. Her cry split the air like a song of defiance. Tiny fists clenched, lungs strong, her eyes opening wide to a world she would never know in chains. I held her against my chest, my tears falling onto her soft skin, whispering promises into her ear. You will never live in fear. You will never confuse control for love. You will grow in the light, not in shadows. Helen was there too, her hand on my shoulder, her eyes shimmering with pride. It was she who became the grandmother my child deserved, not the woman whose venom once poisoned our lives. Ryan was nowhere near barred by the restraining order, and though part of me still ached at the ghost of the man he once had been, I knew now that the version I loved had been consumed long before. Marjorie. I later learned tried once more to claw her way back into relevance, showing up at the hospital with a bouquet and a note signed simply, "Blood is forever," but security intercepted her before she even reached the ward. That note became yet another piece of evidence added to the file that kept her permanently severed from us. The more she tried, the more she buried herself. In the weeks after Elena's birth, the exhaustion of motherhood pressed down on me, but alongside the sleepless nights came something fierce, a determination that every cry answered, every midnight feeding, every small victory was proof that I had won. Not just for me, but for her. The bruises on my body faded, the echoes of fear dulled, but the fire inside me did not extinguish. It burned with clarity. I would never allow anyone to rewrite my story again. Healing was not instant. It came in fragments in therapy sessions where I learned that trauma does not disappear, but reshapes itself in mornings, where I stared at the mirror and whispered, "You are enough," until I finally began to believe it. It came in the laughter of my daughter as she discovered her voice in the quiet afternoons, where I read to her from the same shelves that once introduced me to Ryan, reclaiming my love for words, for stories, for life itself. People sometimes asked if I regretted marrying him, if I regretted letting Marjorie into our home, and I would pause before answering. Regret is too easy a word. What I carried was not regret, but truth. The truth that love can blind, that family can poison, but also that strength can rise from wreckage. Ryan and Marjorie lived their fallout in shadows, their reputations stained their names, spoken with pity and disdain, while I lived mine in light, holding a child who represented not pain, but rebirth. One evening, as the sun set in golden streaks across the nursery wall, I rocked Elena to sleep and thought of the war Marjorie declared at my dinner table months ago. She had believed she could erase me, silence me, control me. But I had not only survived, I had written the ending she never expected. Justice was not just a gavel in a courtroom, it was this, a safe home. A free heart, a child who would never inherit the chains of abuse. Looking down at Elena's tiny fingers curled around mine, I whispered the words I wanted her to carry always. We are not defined by the families that hurt us. We are defined by the courage to break their cycle. And in that quiet as the lights glowed softly above us, I knew with unshakable certainty that I had not just destroyed them, I had saved us.